This pattern of spending began almost immediately. It seems your sister took advantage of you both.
Some betrayals are committed by strangers. Those are painful, but they are clean in a particular way. You can be angry without ambivalence, without the terrible complexity of love sitting underneath the fury. The betrayal I am about to describe was committed by my brother. And I want you to understand, before anything else, that I love him. Past tense, present tense, it is still complicated. Even now, even after everything. That complexity is part of the story. And I won't pretend otherwise. My name is Sandra Fielding. I am 58 years old and I live in Leicester, England. My mother, Patricia, was diagnosed with early stage vascular dementia in September 2022. She was 79. She had lived independently in the same terraced house in Loughborough for 31 years, managed her own affairs with precision and quiet pride, and had, as I would later discover, and as my brother, Gary had apparently known for some time, a savings account containing just over £46,000, accumulated carefully across decades of modest living. Gary is 4 years older than me. We had never been close in the way some siblings are, no shared friends, different temperaments, different lives. But we were family, and family, in my understanding of the word, meant that when our mother's diagnosis arrived, we would face it together. Gary came to the hospital the day of the diagnosis. He sat with me and Mum for 2 hours. He held her hand. He cried, genuinely I believe, in the corridor afterward. He said all the right things about care, plans and support, and making sure she was comfortable. The following week, while I was organising a GP referral and researching dementia support services in Loughborough, Gary drove to our mother's bank with her bank card and her PIN, which she had given him months earlier in a moment of casual trust, and transferred £46,200 into his personal current account across 4 separate transactions. I didn't know this for 11 weeks. What I knew in those 11 weeks was that something felt wrong at Mum's house in a way I couldn't name. She seemed more anxious than her diagnosis alone explained. She kept mentioning her savings, asking if they were safe, which I reassured her about without understanding why she was asking. Twice she started sentences that she didn't finish, looking at me with an expression I now recognize as the particular distress of someone who knows something has happened but cannot hold the memory long enough to report it. I contacted her bank in December 2022 to begin organizing a lasting power of attorney, which I should have arranged earlier and which the dementia diagnosis made urgently necessary. The bank's customer vulnerability team was helpful and thorough. During our conversation, the advisor asked whether I was aware of any recent large transactions on my mother's account. I said I was not. She could not give me details without proper authorization, but she told me, carefully, professionally, staying precisely within what she was permitted to say, that I should make it a priority to obtain legal access to the account records and review them thoroughly before proceeding the specific way she said it. Told me everything she could not. I drove to a solicitor's office in Leicester the next morning, a specialist in court of protection and elder law named Helen Burrows. I explained the situation, the diagnosis, the bank conversation, the anxiety I had observed in my mother, the incomplete sentences. Helen listened. Then she said, Sandra, I need you to prepare yourself for the possibility that what you are about to find in those bank records is not accidental. I already knew. I think I had known for weeks. I just hadn't allowed myself to complete the thought. The court authorization for emergency access to my mother's financial records took 9 days. Helen had flagged it as a vulnerable adult financial abuse case, which moved it to an expedited track. The bank statements arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Helen and I reviewed them together in her office. 4 transactions, September 19th, 21st, 24th, and 26th, the week immediately following my mother's diagnosis. Amounts of £15,000, £12,000, £11,200, and £8,000, all processed at the same branch, all made in person using my mother's card. Total, £46,200. Destination, a personal current account registered to Gary Allen. Fielding, Helen sat back in her chair and was quiet for a moment. He structured them below the threshold that triggers automatic enhanced scrutiny, she said. That's not accidental. Someone knew what they were doing. I want to tell you about the drive home from Helen's office. I sat in my car in the car park for 25 minutes before I could drive. Not because I was devastated, though I was, but because I was trying to locate inside myself the right feeling to have, the correct response to the information that my brother had walked into a bank the week our mother was diagnosed with dementia and systematically emptied her life savings. What I found, after 25 minutes, was not rage and not grief. It was something quieter and more purposeful. A decision, a direction that I drove home, and I called Gary that I did not tell him what I knew. I asked how he was, how he thought Mum was doing, whether he had given any more thought to the care plan conversation we'd had in October. He was warm and engaged and expressed appropriate brotherly concern throughout. He mentioned, casually, that he had been helping Mum with some financial organizing, that she had asked him to assist with some account management, that it was all properly handled. I said that was great and that I was glad she had support. I ended the call, documented every word of it in a written note timed and dated, and emailed it to Helen that evening. Helen filed a formal report with Adult Social Care and the Police Financial Crimes Unit simultaneously. She also sent Gary a formal legal letter, as my mother's newly appointed power of attorney, requesting the immediate return of all funds removed from Patricia Fielding's account in September 2022, with a full written account of the circumstances and authorization for each transaction. Gary's response came through a solicitor he had apparently retained quickly. The initial position was that the transfers had been made at our mother's explicit request, that she had asked him to hold the money safely on her behalf, and that he intended to return it in full once appropriate arrangements were in place. Helen told me this was the standard opening position in cases of this kind. She described it as a retreat toward defensible language, rather than a denial of the facts. The Police Financial Crimes Unit interviewed Gary 6 weeks after Helen's report. I was not present and do not know everything that was said. What I know is that within 3 days of that interview, his solicitor contacted Helen with an unconditional agreement to repay the full £46,200 plus 4 months of applicable interest. Every penny was back in my mother's account within 10 working days. The Crown Prosecution Service reviewed the case for potential criminal charges. They concluded, and this is the part that is hardest to sit with, that prosecution was unlikely to succeed given the complexity of establishing intent in cases involving family financial arrangements and a complainant with dementia. Gary was not charged. He was, however, reported to his employer. He worked in financial services, a fact that had not escaped Helen's attention, and I was told, through a route I will not specify here, that his employment situation changed significantly in the months that followed. My mother does not fully understand what happened. Some days she asks about her savings and I tell her they are safe and she nods and moves on. Whether she has moments of clarity in which she knows, I genuinely cannot tell. I hope not. Gary and I have not spoken since the repayment was confirmed. I don't know if we will again. I have thought about this more than almost anything else connected to this situation. More than the money. More than the legal process. The grief of it. The specific loss of a version of a family that, whatever its limitations, was mine. I don't have a resolution for that part. I don't think I'm supposed to. What I want you to take from this story is something practical. Because practical things are what I can offer. If your parent is aging, if they are beginning to struggle, beginning to need support, beginning to share pins and Account details and passwords with people, because it feels easier than managing alone. Please do not wait to understand their financial picture. Not in suspicion. In love. In protection. In the same care you would give any vulnerable thing you are. Responsible for the lasting power of. Attorney exists for exactly this. Get it done early. Know what accounts exist. Check them gently. Regularly. Once.my mother saved £46,200 across a lifetime of careful, quiet effort. It came back to her. Not every family's story ends that way, but I made sure ours did. That is what I have left to be proud of.